More than 200 congressional Republicans sent a message to President Trump, and the message is stand your ground. 52 Republican senators and 177 House Republicans signed a letter telling the president to reject any deal that allows Iran to continue its nuclear program. The letter reads in part, the scope and breadth of Iran's nuclear buildout have made it impossible to verify any new deal that allows Iran to continue enriching uranium. We cannot afford another agreement that enables Iran to play for time as the JCPOA did. The Iranian regime should know that the administration has congressional backing to ensure its ability to enrich uranium is permanently eliminated. Earlier, I spoke with Nebraska Senator and member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Pete Ricketts, who led this letter to the president. Senator, thank you very much for joining me, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me on.
Senator, tell me, have you been briefed on any of the latest and whether or not, to the level of destruction or lack thereof? I know that it's early time for assessment of the damage done, but have you been told anything?
So the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair, Dan Kane, said that it's too early to tell the damage assessment. So we're supposed to have a briefing on this on Thursday with regard to that. But I think one of the things that's important to note that even if these facilities are completely destroyed, this is not going to stop Iran from pursuing an enrichment program or pursuing a nuclear weapon. That we need to continue to put pressure on them to give up this ambition. And until they fully renounce that, as 51 of my colleagues and I wrote a letter to the president saying, Iran needs to renounce their ability to have enrichment and to pursue a bomb. That's when this really ends. This is a step. It's a very strong step. The president sent a message saying that he's not going to allow Iran to have an enrichment program, but it is only a step. We've got more work to do.
If it's a fact that it's set back, 3 or 6 months, which obviously is not going to solve this is not going to solve for Israel and for everybody else in the world who doesn't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Would you expect that there would be military action by the United States to step up very soon, or do you think it's in a month or 2 months or 3 months? What should the American people expect?
The American people should expect that we're going to continue to put pressure on Iran. That's going to involve diplomatic, it's going to involve economic, and it may involve military. We've got to make sure they don't have a nuclear weapon. Look, we can see the problems with nuclear North Korea that we're already facing. We don't need to add a nuclear Iran that will be able to threaten our bases in the Middle East, threaten our homeland potentially, and of course threaten our ally Israel. So this is something that we're going to have to use all of our levers of power to be able to make sure Iran cannot have an enrichment program or a nuclear bomb.
Well, you mentioned diplomatic, and everyone keeps saying that we all want diplomatic solutions. I want one, you want one, and wouldn't that be great? But has there been any indication, and I don't just mean now in this administration, but going back to any administration, I suppose we could go back to to 2015 with the deal, but is there any indication that Iran is receptive to a diplomatic solution? Because they seem to be deceitful and continue their enrichment even when they're talking to us.
Well, this is why the president is the right person to handle this right now, because indeed what's happened over the last decade or so is that Iran has just stalled for time. They played the Obama administration, they played the Biden administration. The first Trump administration actually brought their foreign reserves down to under $14 billion by enforcing sanctions. So that made them less dangerous. And now President Trump has, again, sent a very clear message. He's not going to allow them to have an enrichment program. So we're going to need to continue to put the pressure on. And when I say diplomatic, things such as our allies in Europe need to, put the sanctions back on Iran. The E3, as I've called for, Germany, France, and the UK need to actually step up their sanctions. We need to make sure Iran knows that they're never going to have peace as long as they're going to continue to push for a nuclear weapon. And that's where we really can get some change. But it's still a long road ahead of us to be able to make sure that they don't get that enrichment program. And that's why we have to use all the levers of power at our disposal.
For the bombing last weekend, I can understand the need for surprise and not consultation with Congress, because it would leak out. Everybody knows things leak in this town. And there have been so many times when we have done military action, the United States, where there's not been consent of Congress. But now we're at a point where when the elements of surprise is sort of over, would you want the president to have more of a dialogue with Congress, House and the Senate, about, about our next plans, rather than sort of make the decision unilaterally himself. Ultimately, he gets probably the last word on this, but more of a consultation with the Hill.
Certainly, the president has a duty to act when he feels the country's in danger. And from the assessments that we've been told about, that Iran is very close to getting a bomb if they chose to pursue that path, which is why I believe the president felt like he had to act, especially given the fact that Iran was not willing to negotiate with us. So I think the president acted under his Article 2 powers to be able to do that. We, as Congress, want to be able to be kept informed of what is going on, to be able to get the intelligence. But at the end of the day, the president, the one who's going to be responsible. And this can't be something that is done by committee. The president is the leader of the country. He's got to take the actions in the executive branch to be able to keep us safe.
Senator, thank you very much for joining me, sir.
Great. Thanks very much, Greta. You have a good evening.